Okay guys, the day has finally come where I'm going to be making a dedicated Elsa Bloodstone video for you. If you've been checking out my channel, you know that I've been bringing her to war recently. I've been using her in endgame content like Act 7 and the Grandmaster's Gauntlet, and quite frankly, I just really enjoy using her, and I think there's a lot to discover about this champion that if you haven't given her a chance, there's a little bit of time for you to look at her abilities, see how she all works together, and take a closer look at her kit. So the way I'm going to structure this video is first I'm going to just tell you my overall thoughts of why I ranked her and why she's on my account today. Then we're going to kind of go over her abilities, but instead of just reading down the list, I'm going to be talking about where she fits in the skill class. Like, what are the things that you expect a skill champion to do? How does she do them, and how does she compare to some of the other top options in the skill class? And then finally, I'm going to show some gameplay of what I consider her basic rotation, because a lot of people enjoy playing her and they love, firing the weapons and all that stuff because her animations are so cool, but they aren't really sure the best way to do the most damage. And I'm going to kind of shed some light on that. So there will be chapters. If you want to just skip ahead to the rotation, you can certainly do that. But I am interested to hear your thoughts on this champion and where you think she stands in the game as well. So thanks for checking it out. So first of all, why did I even rank her? Why do I have her as a rank 3? Well, I was at a point in my account where I needed a 3rd and 4th rank 3, and I had the skill catalyst, and I really didn't have any options at all. I was waiting for someone like Nick Fury, but just couldn't pull the guy. I don't even have him as a 5-star, believe it or not. And Elsa was just sitting there on my account at Sig 40, asking for that catalyst. So I decided to be bold and made the decision and ranked her all the way up to rank 3, and I gave her a bunch of Sig stones simply because this was at a time in the game where you just needed rank 3s that had good enough prestige so that you could get your profile squared away. And while she doesn't have the best prestige by any means, it is pretty similar to someone like Nick Fury, and she has one of those awakened abilities that scales really well and actually does add benefit to the fight, but doesn't require Sig 200. So for me, she kind of checked all the boxes for a rank 3. And I think this might be something that you can relate to, but have you ever ranked up a champion that you were sort of not 100% sure if you wanted to use them or not, but you kind of felt like it was the right thing, and then it was after you ranked them that you started actually using them and discovering some new things about them? And that's really what kind of sheds light on, the full potential of a champion like her, was the fact that I already had her ranked up and I started using her around and realizing that she does have a very, very good kit for the current meta of the game. And on top of just being a fun champion, she is also quite a good champion and someone that I would recommend ranking on certain accounts at certain progression levels. So let's talk a little bit about her abilities. I'm just going to click open the abilities here, and like I said, we're not going to really go over the entire thing because I do believe enough people have an understanding of her kit, but I am going to break this thing down into 4 categories, and I'll edit this video so that there will be some clips in the background and some text as well. But let's talk about skill champions, right? So what do you expect a skill champion to do? Well, I can break it down into 4 categories. First of all, skill champions tend to have a way to do damage in creative ways. And what I mean by that is, more than just sort of like brute force, armor breaks, physical damage, like you might expect a cosmic champion to just like beat down on the opponent. When it comes to skill champions, there's often a way to manipulate your crit rate, and there's often a way to do damage over time debuffs and some other kind of direct damage so that you can get even more types of damage that go around resistances and armor and things like that. And she has a number of ways of doing this. The next category that I expect a good skill champion to have, and this one is a little bit more niche, is the ability to create openings and have like an alternate play style where the word skill sort of means that there's like multiple ways to find openings and get in there when you're fighting the champion. So let's just look at those 2 first before we get onto the last 2. And when it comes to damage, she has lots of ways to really increase her damage. The first way, let's look at her awakened ability, which is not needed, but it really does come in handy because you are often fighting large or extra large champions. That's like a very, very large percentage of the defenders that you're going to run into, or science champions. And you could see at SIG 40, the amount of damage that is added to your critical hits is over 3,200. And the way this works is this is like a flat additive number that is added to the yellow number. So like if your crit would have hit for 3,000, your crit will now hit for like 6,200. So it's just additive to the yellow number, which is really nice. And also you do get more critical damage rating, which isn't as noticeable, but it is nice when you're facing the last champion on the quest. So that alone means that anytime you crit, and you will be critting a lot, is pretty awesome. The next thing is, we're not going to talk about her shrugging right now, but on her special 1 activation, you get a pretty massive precision buff. Now, this is not like Cosmic Ghost Rider level. This is about half of what Cosmic Ghost Rider puts up. But this is a very significant increase to crit level. And what it will do is it'll mean that like you're critting not all the time, but certainly a lot of the time. And depending on the rounds that you're using, having the ability to crit so much can definitely bypass resistances and can also lead to some other good effects. Speaking of other good effects, when you end your combo with a light, or you throw the special 2, or you do your well-timed block, you're going to be putting the Behemoth Buster debuff on them, which means anytime you crit, there's going to be additional direct damage based on how many stacks of these debuffs you have. So just looking at the 3 things we talked about, basically you're going to be critting more because if you throw one special 1, you have that great precision. If you're putting the Behemoth Busters on them, you're going to be giving them red direct damage. And then when you're fighting L, XL, and Science champions, the crits themselves are going to have an additive bonus to them. And then on top of that, you have the other rounds, the Hellfire rounds, which come on the medium combo ender and the special 1, which will apply an Incinerate, or if they're Incinerate immune, they will apply a Cold Snap. And there are very few champions in the game that are both Incinerate immune and Cold Snap immune. Of course, there are some, like Human Torch, and Mephisto kind of falls in that category, and Colossus and things like that. But for the most part, you're fighting an Incinerate immune, you're going to throw the Cold Snap on them automatically, and it's going to be doing the same amount of damage, which is pretty nice. So that's another way for her to increase her damage, get around resistances, and with that, she's certainly not like Nick Fury level when it comes to damage, but it is very, very solid damage. So on that first number there, I give her a check for ways to do damage in creative ways. Now let's look at the second one, which I said was creating openings. Well-timed blocks. When performing a well-timed block on basic attacks, Elsa has a 100% chance to evade. This ability goes on cooldown for 11 seconds. With the counter evade, she uses her revolver. It deals a little bit of direct damage, and it's going to be putting on a Behemoth Buster essentially. So this ability is extremely useful. And when I was talking about creating openings, there are some other skill champions that have similar abilities. Like for example, Killmonger with his counter punch charges, which you can take a blocked hit and you get an automatic opening. Similar with Mole Man and his Unstoppable, and certainly a built-up Aegon with the heavy charge, which is sort of the same thing. But all of those abilities require getting hit into the block, which who knows, maybe they're unblockable, maybe there's block penetration, maybe you're going to be taking a lot of damage every time you try to do that. With Elsa, you basically get this free opening, very similar to Ghost phasing, and the only issue with it is there's a cooldown, but if you play in a certain way and you weave these counter evade, as I call them, on the well-timed blocks, you're going to not only be creating openings, making the fight a little bit smoother, you're going to be applying another Behemoth Buster on the opponent, but additionally, if they are medium dashing towards you, this is going to count as an intercept. So similar to Killmonger, where if they hit your block and you immediately counter punch them back, it'll count as an intercept. This one, just by essentially parrying, well-timed blocking, will count as an intercept. And because of this, there are many nodes in the game, like the one, I can't think of the name of it, the one in AQ where, you know, when you intercept, it gives you a bonus for damage. Certainly in Alliance War, there is the ebb and flow intercept where you need to land intercepts. And a lot of the defense tactics in Alliance War require intercepts to take off some kind of like protection, like, you know, in Protect and in the original version of High Ground. So needless to say, landing intercepts, you know, Do Not Go Gentle is another example. Getting automatic intercepts is something that Ghost can do that a lot of people rate very highly. And Elsa essentially has the same ability if you just perform a well-timed block. So before I go over more of her abilities, let's just focus on those two. High damage and creative ways of making damage that aren't just physical hits, and the ability to create openings every 11 seconds on the fight that don't require parry. That alone is an extremely versatile kit, and as the game is becoming a little bit more inclusive of all types of champions that are able to do it instead of like super niche counters, just those two things alone make her a well above average champ, because you can certainly just bring her into any old matchup, and the fact that you're able to create openings and do high damage means that she's going to be a very adequate champion for almost any challenge. I just saw one of my friends, Spinnaker 3, take the last Summer of Pain Adaptoid with Elsa Bloodstone. And that's a fight that she has no business taking. Like, she doesn't have any way to deal with Unstoppable, with power gain, with things like that. And yet, just the two things I mentioned, the ability to create openings and the ability to do a lot of damage, makes her a very viable champion for those. So again, those two things alone, big check in my book. Let's talk about the other two abilities when it comes to skill champions that we like to see. The first one is either countering defensive ability accuracy reduction type stuff, which is sort of the classic skill ability when it goes all the way back to like Black Widow and Elektra and Crossbones, the original skill champions, or either one, and or countering evade in some way. Now, Elsa Bloodstone does have a way to counter evade. She does not have a way to deal with defensive ability accuracy, but her evade countering is unique to any other skill champion. And what it is right here: if the opponent has triggered an evade or they are immune to incinerate, a matching cold snap debuff is inflicted instead, which prevents evade from activating. Now, this definitely has some limitations, right? Because there are some cold snap immune champs, there are some debuff immune champs, there are debuff shruggers. So in any of those scenarios, this, would be icing on the cake for her, but it would not be applicable to matchups like that. However, it is the only skill champion that is able to apply cold snap, and in general, cold snap is a pretty rare debuff. And the fact that a skill champion is able to do it, and that it's not an ability accuracy type prevention of evade, it's just a flat turning off of all evade, that's going to take care of any type of evade that goes over 100%. And we're seeing more and more, like the evaders that were in the Grandmaster Gauntlet, some of the Alliance War interactions, we're seeing that ability accuracy, like a la Falcon or Black Widow, isn't all it's cracked up to be in some matchups where you go over 100%. So yes, she does have some limitations. Is she the best evade counter? I would say no, especially because you do need to get evaded one time. But it is a very reliable ability. Like, say you're going up against Mixmaster and you know how to trigger evade. All you have to do is do, medium, light, light. On that second light, they're going to evade. You can be ready for it. You can get out of the way, make sure that you don't get punished. And then the next time you do a medium, light, medium combo, you're going to be able to take care of that evade for the rest of the fight, because this cold snap, if they are not immune to it, is able to have 100% uptime. So it's a very interesting ability. It's not her greatest strong suit, but the fact that she has it, and there may be a champion someday that's immune to True Strike, or maybe you're using Killmonger and there's no way to punish one of the specials, which occasionally does happen. I know there's ways around it with his counter punch, but there are times that you cannot fully access the True Strike on Killmonger, or maybe you're using Mole Man and there's debuffs involved in the fight and you're going to shoot up to Frenzy and therefore you lose your true accuracy. You know, there's a lot of factors when it comes to dealing with evade, and she does have an interesting niche when it comes to it. The last thing that we're going to talk about is all the way up here, which is when suffering from a non-damaging debuff, Elsa has a 100% chance to purify one of every debuff every 2.6 seconds. So the thing I was going to get at as the fourth ability that we want skill champions to have is the ability to shrug debuffs. And again, this is kind of icing on the cake for her, but it does have some very interesting reactions and interactions with like some very potent nodes and defenders in the game. So, you know, she's definitely not like Mole Man level of Shrugging or Kingpin with the synergy, or even Crossbones who has 90% to shrug all debuffs. But all of those champions kind of have caveats, right? Because Mole Man, if he shrugs 20, he's going to shoot up to Frenzy, and then you lose that ability. You know, Kingpin only has a 60% chance to shrug unless if you bring the synergy. And even if you do bring the synergy, if you get back-to-back debuffs really quickly, then they're not going to shrug. And then when it comes to Crossbones, the same thing. It's only 90%, which is most of the time, but not all the time. And like Kingpin, if they're coming in rapid fire, they're not going to always shrug for you because the chance goes down. So Elsa cannot deal with damaging debuffs, and that's maybe a weakness, but at the same time, you know, you wouldn't bring her in if there was some kind of damaging debuff anyway. But she has a 100% chance to get rid of the non-damaging kinds. So what are some of these? These are like the nodes where they stack up weakness or the fatigue debuffs on you, which can be annoying if those things start stacking and then you lose a bunch of damage. Every 2.5 seconds or so, this is just going to naturally purify without you having to do anything, without you having to even think about it. So you might have one on you for a little bit of time, but it's going to go away, and that's guaranteed, and it doesn't take up any brain space to deal with it. Additionally, this is extremely powerful against Void, because with Void, you know, sometimes there's other stuff going on in the fight and you can't count your combo. There's a lot going on, and just to know that you will get a stack of a single debuff, but you know, it may not last for that long, and you will not get a stack of more than one, unless you get hit, of course, then it's really powerful for countering Void. And I would say, I think she's one of the most like true hard counters to Void out there. Especially when you see Void on a node in Alliance War on Path 5, where there's additionally the Ebb and Flow intercept. You have the free intercepts, you have high damage against Science champions, you're able to cold snap him even though he's Incinerate immune, and you're shrugging these debuffs all the time. Like, it doesn't get more hard counter than that in my mind. So very, very powerful ability. And again, like the first two were the things that I think bring her like at a very high level, but the fact that she has this debuff shrugging ability is pretty fantastic. And on top of that, she gets a precision buff when she shrugs. So this is only going to increase her damage even more. It's going to bring her crit rate even higher when you get off the special one, and you're just going to have a great time. So that is about all I have to say about her abilities. Next up, we're going to move on to rotation. Actually, two more things that I should mention before I turn this off is, of course, if you are running the Recoil Tree Masteries and there's a bleed debuff on yourself against non-mutant champions, it's going to cause a passive degeneration, which can be quite powerful for auto fight, I found. If you throw on Nick Fury and Quake and you're auto fighting with her with the recoil tree on, you're going to be direct damaging them, and you get all those free evades from the Nick Fury and Quake synergy, which will put Behemoth Busters and do direct damage on them. So it's actually a pretty fun ability, but certainly as a defender, this can be annoying. Sometimes people do place her with the Recoil Tree Masteries, and then you have to deal with a mutant. It sort of forces a mutant on the team. But this doesn't have a lot of practical value when you're fighting as her. However, there are going to be times where you accidentally get a bleed on yourself, in which case, this is going to be a little bit helpful to counter that. And the last thing is just the way her special 3 works. You get these cruelty buffs on yourself, and then if you start alternating special 1 and special 2, you're able to keep them up for the rest of the fight. I do kind of find that this messes up the flow a little bit, but when we go over the rotation, I'll talk a little bit about how this works and if you want to do it in a longer matchup. So let's move on to her rotation. So talking about her rotation, we're just going to have some clips going on in the background. In most cases, I do not get to the special 3, though in a very long matchup, you are able to get some cruelty buffs. It's very, very rare that you're going to want to use her in some kind of long form content though. So the basic goal is I like to use the Behemoth Busters, which is on the light enders first. As we build up, we want to get rid of them because when you have an empty clip, your combat power rate goes up. So again, we're mostly doing that with the well-timed blocks if we can, and with the light enders. We're going to throw a special 1, which has the all-important precision buff. This precision buff is paused until we throw another special, so right now it's indefinite. And then as you can see, as we're critting, it's doing extra direct damage. Because we're fighting a Science XL champion, we're getting the bonuses to our big yellow numbers. We're getting the combat power rate to get us up to a big special 2. And now when the Behemoth Busters make their way back and are reloaded, we're able to unleash a very large special 2 that has lots of Behemoth Busters on the opponent, lots of direct damage, and that's going to be the way to do the most damage possible with her in sort of a short to medium fight. Now, if you're doing like long form content, we're going to show some Rolk footage from LOL, and in this case, what you want to do in these long fights is you do want to get all the way up to the special 3. Throw the special 3. At that point you get 3 cruelties, which is only going to continue to add to your damage on the critical hits, which as we've already talked about, you're going to be landing lots of crits, so that's nice. And the way to keep up these cruelties is you essentially want to alternate between special 1 and special 2 so that you basically empty the clip of one kind and then load the clip of the other one. And anytime you empty the clip, it's going to basically refresh all of the cruelty buffs on the opponent, and you're going to be doing the most damage possible. So, she's one of those champions that's really fun to play. Like she's shooting all these rounds at the opponent. You have the chance to create openings, and she has all the abilities that we've talked about that make her a very good champion. And that's about all I have to say, guys. So enjoy the rest of this clip. I really enjoyed doing this breakdown for you. If you have some suggestions for more videos like this in the future for other champions that I use, I would be happy to do more videos in this style. Hope you learned something today. Hope that you enjoyed this Elsa Bloodstone showcase, and I will catch you guys in the next one.